Alberta from all sides as we reach a turning point in the development of our oil sands. Tonight, the NewsHour begins a special look at not only the remarkable challenges involved, but the political battle raging over the resource. Now, just to give you an idea of the perspective here, after 40 years, Alberta has barely scratched the surface of its oil sands resource. According to the latest reserve estimates, industry has taken less than 3% of the available oil out of the ground. But the amount they are taking out is increasing dramatically. At one point, we expected to hit 1 million barrels a day by 2020. We beat that mark 3 years ago. Now, that's meant a dramatic jump in greenhouse gas emissions. Premier Stelmach says Alberta cannot be expected to carry the blame for climate change. He was reacting to a leaked draft federal report that suggests drastic action on the oil sands industry. One recommendation is to force the oil sands to meet greenhouse gas limits in the Kyoto Accord. Stelmach says everyone has to work together to cut emissions, not just Alberta. Now, there is speculation the $1.4 billion tax benefit to the oil sands will be scrapped in the March 19th federal budget. So, with so much at stake, the NewsHour is in Fort McMurray for the next 2 days, and Gord joins us now again with more on the battle brewing between Alberta and the rest of Canada. Gord.
A pretty big battle for sure, Nirmala. The oil sands and the environmental impact at the root of this huge fight we're talking about. The battleground also in public opinion. Tonight, an exclusive national poll put together for Global by Ipsos Reid, giving us a bit of a sense on how much of a fight this is going to be in the days and weeks and months ahead. Ipsos Reid asking this: if Canadians would pay an extra 5 cents a litre for gas to fund research for greener fuel alternatives, would you be happy with that? Canadians split almost exactly down the middle. But Albertans, as you can see, less supportive than people in any other part of Canada. Only 42% saying, yeah, you know, they'd pay the extra. 54% saying no way. A more important issue for the Harper government and for the energy sector perhaps is this. When we asked, should Alberta have stricter emission standards, even if it increases the cost of producing oil and gas, 68% of Canadians agreed. 28% said no. Again, Albertans less supportive, perhaps not surprisingly, than anyone else in the country. Although most of us do support stricter standards, 51% compared to 45% against, it's still not close, though, to the rising tide of opinion elsewhere. So we're talking about the Alberta oil sands, land that may contain enough oil to last at least another 100 years. The tricky part, though, is how you extract that oil. And here's a little bit of a primer, if you will. The problem is the oil is buried and surrounded by rock and sand. And in order to get the oil out, you need to use a lot of water and a lot of natural gas to heat it to create steam. That steam then is injected into the muck, which helps the sand sink and the oil rise to the surface. It's an expensive process. And the technology that's currently used is to blame for the majority of the increase in greenhouse gases. Canada, of course, responsible for.
They're a very significant polluter. If you look at the top 10 greenhouse gas emitters in Canada, number 3 and number 4 are both tar sands operations.
So that has led, obviously, to a loud call for changes. But the oil industry warns too many restrictions may in fact harm the willingness to invest here. So you've got to be very careful. They're also saying the impact, and they're already doing a lot to ease the environmental impact. Imperial Oil, for example, saying they've spent $15 million and plan to over the next 5 years to help researchers find some new solutions.
We're going to be trying to lower the bar so that it's much easier to do environmentally sustainable processing of oil sands, so that it's possible to eliminate water use, so it's possible not to emit so much greenhouse gases.
Other companies like Syncrude have invested $40 million a year in research for new technologies to try and improve the way they do business. So here we are in this booming economy in a community that comes with it, when you've got that kind of cash and a red-hot, superheated economy, significant social problems. Big bucks giving workers an opportunity to indulge perhaps in big vices. Well, as Gary Bobrovitz tells us, drug abuse tops that list.
It's the Battle of Alberta. Half the patrons in this sports bar support the Flames. The other half cheer for the Oilers. But all of these oil sands workers agree it's time to party. And for a growing number, that means drugs.
There's a lot of temptation. You got to realize any of these kids working out on site, they can't get away with the marijuana and the drugs that stay in the system because they do the drug testing on a random basis in the industry. So a lot of them, I think that cocaine is probably an easy way out because it leaves your body in a certain period of time, so you don't get the marijuana smokers like you do in BC.
This is Fort McMurray's version of crack cul-de-sac in Calgary. These Newfoundlanders are getting high on cocaine. Workers from the rock smoking rock.
There may be plenty of drugs here in downtown Fort McMurray, but there are no payphones. That's because dealers were using them to score, so they were all taken out. That's how bad the problem is in this boomtown.
Well, it's definitely accessible. You know, it's out there. Everyone knows it.
These teenage students say more and more of their friends are getting stoned. There are drugs in community high schools, and that has forced police to set up shop inside.
This year we just got a resource officer because of the drug problems in the school. As a teen, you do make a lot of money up here. You know, I was making $14 an hour at a part-time job, and that's good money. And also, there isn't really much to do up here.
It would be a worry for me if my children were to be here. I have boys that are 21 and 23, and as much as I raised them with morals and all that kind of stuff, I'm not sure that I would want them here because I don't know how easily they could be influenced.
Big money, fast life. It's the downside of a red-hot economy fired up by the oil sands. For Global News in Fort McMurray, this is Gary Bobrovitz reporting.
Now, many of the workers come from big cities like Calgary and Edmonton, for example. They travel back and forth as part of a rotating shift. And locals believe those transients are the ones responsible for bringing in the crack, the pot, and the crystal meth. Some of the problems we're seeing here, like the ones we see at home in Calgary as well, an overburdened healthcare system, affordable housing. Mayor Melissa Blake has to try and deal with that kind of times 10 in Fort Mac. We're going to talk to her a little bit later about, is there a possibility, if maybe not touching the brake on this red-hot economy, maybe pulling off the gas? We'll hear her comments on whether you can do that up here in the oil sands in Fort Mac.